Hi, everybody. In this lecture video, we're going to talk about Chapter 1 in your textbook, Business and Professional Excellence. We'll start with our agenda for this video. First, we're going to define professional excellence in communication. Then we're going to talk about some of the relevant communication phenomena in business and professional communication contexts. Then we're going to go over the 4 keys to communication in the workplace. We'll talk about the interaction model of communication, then communication apprehension, and some communication ethics to end. So, like I said, we're going to start off defining professional excellence in communication. There are many definitions of communication, but the one I'm about to show you is the one we're going to use for this course. But we'll start with professional excellence. Professional excellence means being recognized for your skills as a communicator, serving as a role model to those around you, recognizing your strengths and developing your weaknesses, being audience-centered, understanding the context, and possessing the ability to adapt and continually improve. The definition of communication that we're going to be using in this course is the process of understanding our experiences and the experiences of others through the use of verbal and nonverbal messages. As I previously said, there are many definitions for communication, but this is the one we will use in this course. Communication is an important skill in both personal and professional contexts in order to make sense of our experiences and those around us. And we do tend to oversimplify this process and think that we're all good communicators because it's such a normal everyday activity. But this phenomenon is actually called communication bravado, in which people tend to overestimate their ability to communicate and fail to recognize that it is a skill that you need to continuously develop and improve upon to achieve professional excellence. So now we're going to talk about some of the relevant communication phenomena that we see in business and professional communication contexts. We have role taking. Oftentimes, when we go into the business and professional type of context, we may be fulfilling a sales role, a customer service role, a public relations role, and these things are all very performative, and we need to present a certain type of face to the people that we're serving and working with. Our previous communication experiences also are relevant in business and professional communication contexts. Because our initial communication impressions impact how we perceive later communication transactions. And this is definitely relevant in a lot of business and professional contexts, especially if you are talking to a client, if they had a bad experience with you or your organization prior to this interaction, they're going to come in expecting it to be a bad interaction. So it's really good if we take time to manage those impressions so that people have good communication experiences and they want to keep having more communication experiences with us. Communication channels are also important to consider in business and professional communication contexts. Consider, for example, if you're texting your friend versus talking to them in person, sometimes your tone is misconstrued or lost in translation. If you use an electronic channel to communicate versus talking to someone face to face. So it's important to consider how channels may affect our messages and what the best channels to send a particular message through may be. Cultural influences are also important. In this context, organizational culture often influences our communication with those in and outside of the organization. For example, organizational cultures will have some norms and some communicative norms that influence how we organize our speech, how we interact with others, and how we present ourselves to our coworkers and the outside world. Communication relationships are also important to consider in business and professional communication contexts. And these can be our social relationships with our coworkers and also our relationship to people in organizational hierarchies and structures and so on. Next, we're going to talk about the 4 keys to communication in the workplace that your textbook outlines. We won't discuss them too much in lectures going forward, but try to keep them in mind as they relate to the topics that we will discuss in these videos going forward, as they might pop up on your tests or maybe even the discussion questions. The first key to communication in the workplace is to know yourself, which means actively assessing your skills as a communicator and then developing strategies to utilize your strengths and develop your weaknesses. The second one, evaluate the professional context. This means to proactively address the needs of your audience and understand the constraints of the communication situation that you are in, as well as developing your skills for communicating with a variety of audiences and situations. The third key, your communication interaction. Be sure to monitor your own verbal and nonverbal cues in addition to the cues from the audience within each communication interaction. And fourth and finally, step back and reflect. So this means to examine the effectiveness of verbal and nonverbal messages that you convey to others and the overall success of various communication interactions, and then take what you've already learned and start the process again, developing the ability to adapt and continually improve. So just to reiterate, those 4 keys to communication in the workplace are to know yourself, evaluate the professional context, be mindful of your communication interaction, and to step back and reflect. Now we're going to go over the interaction model of communication. In this model of communication, we have a sender who encodes messages with verbal and nonverbal cues, and a receiver who decodes the message. So therefore, there is a co-creation of meaning between the sender and the receiver. Also present in this model is the message itself and feedback. So they're both sent through the communication channel, and cues are helpful and responsible for the distinction in encoding and decoding messages. And then the channel is the method by which the message is sent. As we kind of talked about a little bit earlier, each type of channel comes with its own strengths and weaknesses. Noise can be external, which is literal noise in your environment, like traffic or phones ringing or something like that. Or it can also be internal, which it could be a condition or a state that you're in that in some way distracts you from the meaning of the message being sent. It's also important to consider the context in which these interactions occur, which includes the location, time, and the occasion or event in which the interaction occurs.